Hello, everybody. I'm going to exercise my new resilience pose. I have this new pose. It's a resilience pose that I came up with as I'm working out this adversity talk that I do based around my TED talk. I talk about resilience, and I have this new pose, and so that's my pose. Just so you know, this says I'm resilient. Today, I'm super excited to have some co-facilitators. I had some very good friends of mine, based upon a Salon 360 event we had last week, where a lot of people around the country came, around the world actually, joined us to talk about the racial divide. So today, the person who's kind of the main head guy with this is Dennis Patoko. So Dennis, welcome. I'm not sure. Welcome, Dennis Patoko. I'm so excited. Dennis leads Biz Catalyst 360. There's all kinds of things he has his hand in, but he's the one who was kind of the catalyst to bring on the Salon. And then, of course, we've got his partner in crime here. We got Mike Vacanti, and he's kind of in the background as well, doing stuff with the Humans First, and it's melding together with some of Dennis's work, which I love seeing. And then we have Melissa. She's one of our other co-conspirators in all of this, to keep the discussions around humanity, the racial divide, how we all show up as better humans in these real tough circumstances. So I wanted to bring all of you on. And so just a little context. I've seen some articles recently, people complaining about that we're doing a lot of talk and not a lot of action. I personally, as a African-American woman, think that we have to continue to have the discussions. While action is taking place, the discussions have to continue to be top of the mind. And so I'm committed to having those discussions, which is why we're on here now, and I'll continue this series. Because I think it's something that's important enough for us to talk about as humans out in the world. We're facing these situations. I just saw that video the other day. I don't know if you saw it, but it was here in Colorado, and it was law enforcement again, with bad images of African Americans, one as young as 6, being put handcuffed on the ground because they had a process or a policy for doing this. When they had to stop and they assumed the car was stolen, they then had to have these people. They did that. They put him to the ground. So it was a 6-year-old. He didn't have handcuffs, but he had to be put on the ground. A couple of the other ones did. And that visual is something that is very disturbing to me, and I'm sure to many. We have to continue to show the visual. We have to continue to have this conversation, because that's the only way it stays top of mind. This is not news cycle here. This is reality. So welcome all of you. I'm just super thrilled to have you and to reflect on that Salon 360 event we had, where we talked a lot more, about the racial divide, and we listened to others as they spoke about it as well. So welcome. So I'm curious to know, what were your reflections or your thoughts as it related to that day? And I want to start with Dennis, obviously, since you were the main catalyst for it. Did it actually turn out to be what it is that you thought it was going to be? Did it kind of meet your initial needs or expectations? And then after we go through that original round robin of us talking about that, then we'll talk about, some of the things we think we want to do, some of the next steps and things like that. So Dennis.
Sure. Great introduction. Thanks, Heather. And that's a great question. Let me just say it absolutely lived up to our expectations, and here's how. We didn't expect a perfect gathering, and that's what we got. And as I've said at the end of the gathering, we're stitching a new garment here. As you so well said, we're tired of the talking. We want walking. And it's easy to say that, but we're ready to do it. So we didn't have a perfect gathering. We didn't have a perfect ending. Now we're curious. Now we're listening. We're doing what we call the postmortem and getting feedback. And it's just a remarkable level of feedback, which I'll share more with you a little later on. But yes, it met our expectations, because we're shaking a tree right now. And we've got some interesting things falling out that we didn't expect, both good and bad. But I'll just close my answer with this. As we said during the gathering, we set the stage, we arranged the orchestra pit, but the folks that are sitting around me right now, we're the conductors. We want to learn from that music and let that music drive us in the right direction. So we're excited to have set the stage. We're excited that almost four dozen people showed up to play the music. And it's up to us now, for us, collectively, to do more walking.
For those, there's probably people right now, just so you know, that are struggling to get on. I don't know what's going on with the stream, but this happens sometimes, which is why I provided the YouTube link. So I will probably go in as you see me. I might be typing because I'm going to try to tell people to go join us at YouTube, because I don't think people are actually able to see us right here. So just an FYI on that. And I want to thank you too, Dennis, for just using your influence, because that's part of this process. When we talk about talking and then walking, it's using the influence that we have, whatever that is, in our small circles, our big circles, right? To get the word out, to kind of drive and push for action. And so, and you're doing that in your sphere of influence. You're controlling that. You are influencing that. So thank you for doing that. All right, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, what's funny is when you start with the, the feedback from the naysayers, right? Saying, hey, that's all talk. This is a situation that's existed my whole life, right? I mean, one of the greatest leaders of my lifetime, I believe, was Martin Luther King, who did a lot of walking along with the talk and brought many, many people along. We just, became more aware of John Lewis and his contributions, as he passed. And I think that the awareness is up there. But Heather, I don't know how else to keep things at the forefront and make this more normal, or normalize these conversations about bringing us to a place of wholeness and respect and well-being and health, right? And healing some of the past without putting it in front of us and keeping it in the dialogue. The actions we take are pretty personal, right? All four of us sitting here together, I'm certain that if we wanted to reach out and flip a switch, if that was available, if that was the action saying we can solve this whole centuries-long thing with a flip of a switch, each one of us would race to take that action. Mm-hmm. But that's not what it is. This is a series of small steps and a series of small actions. And by discussing what are those best actions in these conversations is actually part of that process. It's a necessary and helpful part of that process to build the relationships that are needed to exemplify what those next actions will be. So I appreciate that feedback about talking and less walking, but I know that when we're finished with a great deep conversation as a starting point that we experienced the other day, that how we build relationships, how I take action to build relationships after that, it's all on me. I can't wait for somebody else to make an improvement. But what I would strongly encourage is don't miss the opportunity to have meaningful relationships in your life that will enrich and empower and help you grow, like our relationship. If there was race dividing us, Heather, I would have cheated myself out of, a great opportunity to have one of the most meaningful relationships in my life. And that's the action we take, is what do we pour into it afterwards?
I love that. What we pour into it. That to me is an action focused statement that you make. And I think here's the thing: the action part is about also continuing to build these relationships and kind of doing the olive branch and reaching across, as you did with Cordelia. Actually, I don't know if she's on now, but that idea of like, yeah, we are different. Yeah, we have different philosophies. Yeah, I'm standing in my shoes, you're standing in yours. But how is it that I can move closer to you? And so in the conversations, in the talking is also where change takes place. I want to make sure that we underpin that it's through the conversations that action is happening and continues to be perpetuated because we're having those conversations, right? So thank you for that. Mm-hmm. Melissa, my dear Dr. Hughes.
Yeah, so I love everything that Dennis and Mike shared, but I think for me it did meet my expectations because I had few expectations going in. For me, one of the things was just having a space where the expectation is that we challenge one another to see something from a different perspective. And I think from that perspective, we were huge successes, right? And I'd like to see that part continue, because from a human nature standpoint, it's just human nature to mistrust and often dislike someone who doesn't share our belief systems, someone who doesn't share our values. That's an ancestral hand-me-down. It's what's kept us alive. It's what, kept the caveman from surviving the other caveman. And so that's kind of a built-in bias. And it's not an innate thing for us to recognize. I think we really have to be intentional in the way we have conversations with people, in the way we search out people who have a different perspective than we do, because that is when professional growth really happens. Professional growth doesn't happen when you're talking to the people who agree with you all the time. I mean, those are really great conversations to have. And we have them a lot, but if you really want to experience some intellectual growth, it's about understanding how to hold two contradictory ideas in your head at the same time. And that's really hard, and it takes practice. And so for me, the expectation is, for me, this Salon 360 is where I am going to be able to practice talking to people, discussing ideas that are different than ideas that I've had before. So yeah, and I'm excited about the next one. I think this one was amazing. And the people came really with earnest intentions. And that's the best you can ask.
I love that. I love this this idea, Dennis, that I really didn't quite think about before, that Melissa just brought up, which is by creating the salon, it's like we're creating a safe space to practice. And that's so if we all start off and we all enter that environment with that awareness and that knowledge that we're showing up to practice on a topic that's super contentious or can be, but we can do it in a safe place that hopefully won't be judged. And what I hope, and we want to make sure that this message continues, is that when, like the ouch idea, that do that, we have those words, we use them, but that it's like we know we're practicing. It's our intention is to practice. And I think that changes things quite a bit. Because in real world, you don't necessarily get a second chance, particularly if the person on the other hand is not a forgiving person.
Yeah.
Right.
So you mentioned that word trust. That word trust is trusting that form and that stage has been set. And I think for some of the new people coming in, they had to find their legs, saying, "Is it really okay to speak up here?" Because as somebody said to me, this ain't your mama's forum. This is not like the 4,000 other streaming conversations going on. Yeah. This is different. It's intentionally different. Let me just give you a little more feedback. This is interesting because the morning after, it's like having a hangover. You wake up, feedback's coming in, and unfortunately, a lot of it started out with the skeptics or the naysayers. Mike used that word, naysayers. We've seen so many of them. But so, my first thought is, wow, it was a great idea, but it's just before its time. They're not ready, whoever they are. But and then 5 seconds later, after your first cup of coffee, you say, wait a minute. I said, I am so grateful to be surrounded by so many people that are willing to tell me what I don't want to hear. Because I do want to hear it, but they're honest enough that I can take the punches and I'm not going to overreact. I'm going to try and be curious. I said when we opened up here, we're stitching a new garment. It was clear to us, not beforehand and not during, but after as well. It's a garment. It needs new thread. It needs a lot more colors. It needs a lot more fabrics to make it work. We need a lot more patience, including us, to kind of build this thing to what we want it to be. And that feedback coming in, let me just give you a couple of thoughts, because we were so inspired by it. After we started digging in, we've now had comments from more than half the people that showed up. We were inspired by the positive stuff, but we were also inspired by the naysayers and all those purveyors of doom and the skeptics. That inspired us it confirmed that we were onto something here. They're putting up all the roadblocks, but we're going to move forward. As my wife would say in her home country of England, we're going to soldier on. But we also witnessed something that was just so inspiring. And, we're reading these comments and we come to a couple here and said, that's it. That's what we're all about. Because people kept saying, and Mike, you and I have talked about this, and Melissa, you and I have talked about it, you can't change the world. What are you up to here? It is what it is. And we said, look, the world's changing around us. We've got high hopes, but we're going to start with one person, one ripple at a time. And let me just share with you 2 ripples that were shared with me. One person shared with us that what they discovered, they were very skeptic, they're very introverted, they're not used to coming to Zoom forums to begin with. So this is the first one. And they came because I personally asked them. And I know these folks, and I said, look, just give it a chance. What this lady said to me, she discovered hope. She said she's discovered that she personally has to rise above her own cynicism, her own preconceptions, and simply do better herself. She's already signed up to come back to the next one. This is a lady that's not used to going online now. The second person said, he said he left with the courage after getting to know his little group. He had 6 people in the group. He left with the courage to no longer avoid uncomfortable discussions. He mentioned he had posted an article in his Facebook feed some time ago, and it got a lot of negative feedback. And rather than respond to it, he let it go. He said after this, he got comfortable enough that he could be curious enough and have enough understanding. He went back and started responding to the feedback. Ready to take the punches, ready to understand, ready to recharacterize it. So 2 ripples of change out of 48 people, that's enough for us. That's what we're trying to create. Now, both of these people are going to spread those little discussions and those discoveries with friends of theirs. And they're going to say, I never looked at it that way. Maybe I should either come aboard or look at things differently. Maybe my cynicism needs to be revisited. Maybe I need more courage to go after this comfortable. And that's the ripples we're hoping for. And that's what tells us we need to soldier on.
Before I go on, because there's so much there that I think we all can just, dig deep into. I just want to say hello to Laura, Kevin, Sarah. I don't know who else is out there, but the good thing is that we share this. And then when LinkedIn doesn't get something right and the stream doesn't work, luckily we get to share it out again afterward because it's recorded. So we'll do that for those in it. But whoever did show up or was able to get through, thank you for being here. Love each of you anyway. So this is like a group, and some of this is like this idea of speaking inside of a silo, like when we all think the same. And so I have, and Sarah brought that up, and she's brought it up a couple different times. One at my authors day, and then the other day I think she might have mentioned, or someone did that was in that group. And so I think the thing is that we uplift each other and we encourage one another, and so we give each other that kind of energy to move forward and continue to have the conversations with people that aren't in that little hub of ours who think very similarly, even though even in our own hub there are people who think differently. But we kind of preach to the choir quite a bit, and so with the work that all of us do, our hope is that we're preaching to the people that we can actually change. So going back to what Dennis is saying, I completely reject that we are not changing the world, and here's what I mean by that. If I change one person's mind or their behaviors towards another person, I have changed the world, because one person is a part of the world. Right. So this is the literal thinking, but I feel like we all have in our own right changed the world. And so we're continuing to do that in this space. So let's start right now. I reject that I'm not changing the world. We are doing it right here, and we're doing it every single time we step out and kind of, like you said, speak up and show up. So yay.
Heather, can I add to that? Because I think that what happened to me when I left was I became much more introspective so changing the world starts with changing here too, and maybe not changing your stance or changing your position, or as Mike likes to say, owning your dot. We all own our dot, but I think expanding your awareness of where other people are, and so that's a change too that has to come from in here. And we cannot have meaningful dialogue if we're not willing to see a different perspective that is different from our own. And so what happened to me when I walked away from the salon was there was a lot of introspection going on. I took those conversations with me and I kept thinking about them. And then, I would bring some of that back into conversations that I had face to face in my life here. So I think part of the change in changing the world starts with changing our level of awareness in what the world is going through, and what people who are not like us are going through, or thinking, or embracing, or whatever. So I think that's important too.
Yeah, I love that, what you just talked about. I'm looking at some of my notes just based upon the sessions I would hop into. And one of them was, we need to make it safe to have others come into our circle and invite more folks in to be, create more true belonging and inclusiveness. And this is, critical in this whole space and everything we're talking about. I was on a podcast call with someone the other day. Oh my gosh, a tremendous young woman. And she was talking about, we were talking about this idea of inviting people to the conversation, inviting them in a way that maybe they can be invited, but also creating a culture where they don't feel like they need an invitation. And that was pretty powerful for me, because, right, if you think about, like, in the corporate world, if you don't receive a meeting invite, then you can't go to that meeting. So that means you're not sitting around the table. And so if you don't have a title, or you don't have the right click, or whatever that is, you don't get invited to that conversation. And so, like, what we're doing here in the salon is that we're inviting everyone, like, basically everybody, come with us, right? There is an explicit invitation. And I think, like what Melissa was saying, is if we create more safety inside that space, then there's like an implicit one that's just more quiet, but they feel it, they sense it. And my hope is that they can take that same thing out in the world, and in their roles inside of corporations, they can create that culture that gives that just, I know I can come irrespective of my Office 365 invites, right? That's huge, because many of us have been excluded from those conversations at our workplaces. So
yeah, well said, Heather. Well said.
Thank you. I love. Here's a little comment from Laura. Let's see, Heather. I like that. Baby steps towards change. I think it is. It's baby steps. Yeah. And I think the more we do that, the more we feel in control. Like right now, there's a lot of things out of our control, but boy, we can control what Melissa said, what's in our heart, what's in our minds, how we move. And then from there, it does what you guys talk about, which is the ripple effect. So.
And just one more thing about that. There is a learning curve. Colin has taught us lots of things about learning how to listen. We also have to learn how to be more open to embracing diverse perspectives. So, it isn't that you're just either good at it or you're not. We can all learn how to be better at this. And so I think that's what the salon lets us do too. It's a little bit of a laboratory.
Yes.
I've been reading some, let's just say, survey comments on diversity and inclusion from a client I'm working with. And one of the things that hit me pretty hard is when we're talking about inclusiveness, including all voices, and that kind of safe space idea, it is also the voices that may not be too popular. And what I mean by that is, it could be folks that are super religious, that are having concerns over here and over here. It could be anybody. Basically, it could be, I wouldn't say like, skinheads, right? But I'm saying, like, really the conversation is all of the plethora of voices, and the openness to have that discussion with that plethora of voices, not just one track like we're talking about in our own little hub where we may be thinking this one way about humanity and maybe someone else thinks another way. And how do we change their perspective unless they come to the table? How do we get the opportunity? So right now we may not have a lot of tolerance for it. Like, oh gosh, they're going that way with it. Like they don't believe that a particular group should be given special focus, that it should be everybody. Like, oh, why is it only Black Lives Matter? It's all lives matter. Like all of these conversations, we need them to come too. They have to come to the table and know that's okay. And we have to figure out how we have that conversation with them too. Because it's a tough one. I mean, as I'm reading through, I'm like, some of these things, I'm like, yeah, I kind of agree. That's really, and some of them are like, oh gosh, that's, but those people have to be there, because those are the ones we want to change. We want to change their hearts. If they're not, then we're just talking to each other,
Heather, you bring up a very good point that we've talked about. The topic, the question for this gathering was, beyond the racial divide, where do we go from here? There's two key things about that question. They're both looking forward. It's beyond the racial divide. As Mike would say, we don't want to be historians. We want to be visionaries. Let's look forward. We know how we got here. So let's focus what limited time we have in this wonderful, safe space to look forward. But the other thing you bring up that we've talked about, let's not kid ourselves that racial is just black and white. But that's why we need more voices, more lenses in this, because you can hear it from around the world. It ain't just about black and white. That's the presumption we bring into this discussion.
Yep.
So it's up to us to continue to clarify that.
Very good point.
And that coming through is really, as you mentioned, Heather, it's a continual path forward, right? And like Dennis had said, it's interesting how many people in conversations, or those that choose not to jump into the conversations, probably even to a greater degree, are the ones that will first come up and say, look at all the barriers in front of us. And it's like, well, so that's known, right? There's not a lot of value in talking about what we know. It's understanding what we can learn. And it's looking around the barriers. And that's when I say visionary, not historian, is it doesn't really help anything if we're just saying, hey, I'm standing in front of this brick wall. It's a barrier that's always been there. And I just want to make you aware that it's still there. And maybe you don't see it, but it's why we can't move forward. And, I think we want to be the people that are saying, I punched one of the bricks out in that wall, or I climbed over it. I've gone around it, come this way. And the goal is to bring as many of us around and through those barriers, not just identify them for each other. So that, I think the real key to embracing the value of being in the salon is those different voices, is to understand what they've experienced as barriers and help each other navigate through, because it's where we end up is so much more important than where we're standing today. And it's not knowledge, it's learning that we're looking for. And in that sense, I took a lot away from that session we were in together, that there was learning rather than just we got past the deep exploration of knowledge, because there's those that want to show up and express all the knowledge. But I think we made a lot of progress in finding the way through. And that's the encouragement of continuation and where we can go from here.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I was one of the things that came away. It was pretty profound in one of this kind of breakout rooms during the salon, was if we approached everyone as if they were in pain, we would start off from a different place. So where that hit me is, as I talked about with you, you all know about this, that conversation I had with law enforcement that I'm going to be entering into again this month, and they have their own sense of pain too, believe it or not, right? So I think people, they're not just all bad people, but in the end, they're like trying to do their very best, many of them, and trying to go about doing their daily jobs. And some people's perceptions then is though, well, they're not doing that. And so the pain that the law enforcement feel is like, oh my gosh, like I can't win here. Like I'm trying to be the good guy or girl. I'm trying to do the right thing. And I just feel unappreciated, a lack of support, right? There's all these, and so if we go in any conversation with another person who does or doesn't think like us, with that idea of, these people are in pain, and how can I help to minimize that pain for them in the conversation we're about to have? Is there a way for me to uplift them, to lift them and put them into a better place mindset wise, or put them on a better path, as Mike talks about, that path? How can we get that path to change because of our interactions with that person? That helps. I think for me, it really, really helps if I think of everybody in that place of like everybody they're going through some sort of pain, and I'm there to kind of be there to help them out of it. It changes how you approach these kind of conversations, doesn't it?
Oh, my goodness. Amen.
Brian, hello there, Brian Kelly.
Hey.
As I was saying, we have people joining that are in our group, and I'm going to challenge all of you at the end of this when I share this out to send it out, but to kind of specifically request, send this to someone who's not inside of Humans First, not inside of 360, try to figure out how we get it to people that aren't inside this hub. because those are the minds that we really want to change. I'm not saying we don't want to change those minds. I'm not saying we don't want to change those hearts, because there's so much, like Mike said, we can learn from even just inside of our group.
Heather, can I add something to what you just said? And
yes.
Let's send it to the people that we continue to see on the sidelines. You know, it's the folks that want to throw the stones of change resistance, hiding behind the headlines. I can't tell you how many LinkedIn threads or article threads we've engaged in just in the last few days, where somebody's throwing a stone at this thing. And what we're doing is we're saying, well, bring your voice. Help us do better. Otherwise, they want us to be drawn into this debate. We're not going to go there. That's the way it's done today, historically. We're changing that. So I ditto what you said, but I want to invite not just cultures and colors. I want to invite those people off the sidelines who maybe, just maybe, have the strength of conviction and the courage to show up and speak up.
Yeah, and their view may be one that we haven't thought of. We need
exactly, and that's all right. I want that contrarian view, so we can say, oh, I never looked at things that way, because they may very well have a point, but it ain't going to be solved from the sidelines.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it all goes back to the pain and your shoes.
Don't change your perspective to match someone else, someone who brings a diverse point of view. Even if you don't shift your belief system or change your perspective, it gives you a greater sense of awareness of why people feel the way they do, why people are sitting where they're sitting, and that just gives us greater understanding of how to have a more meaningful dialogue with that person and the next person. So in this case, I think, knowledge really is power, and understanding why people feel the way they do is an insight that is just invaluable. And if we are going to have meaningful dialogue, we need that insight.
If anybody asks us, what is the objective? I can talk about ripples of change. One word, and you just defined it, Melissa. It's enlightenment. That's what we want. I came away smarter. I came away looking at things differently. That's what we want, enlightenment. And with that enlightenment comes those ripples.
I like this, Brian's little added thing too here. What perspectives do we not have? Whose perspectives may we be missing that will enrich the way forward? And like I said, as I'm sitting here reading these, I get so much insights, obviously, from these different comments. I get it from people that are from all walks, and I have no clue what they look like, and I have no, any of them. But some of them are really eye-opening, and I do wonder, I want them to come in, and I want them to feel so they have to feel just as safe as the other people. So everybody needs to feel safe in their shoes. Mm-hmm. Right, that's how they feel. They feel like they belong. They feel recognized when they feel safe in their shoes and in a group of people. And I think that's going to be our biggest obstacle, is helping people. Like each of us can help one person. And I think that's how we start to change the world, is by one of us helping the other person across from us who may be thinking differently feel okay to say the things they want to. Because even a couple of them said, well, I'm not even sure I should be putting this here. Like, because I'm assuming it's confidential. Like, just, again, there's that fear in this expectation that Big Brother is watching, and that there's all this stuff that's going to happen to them when they actually speak up counter to what's happening in the mainstream. Like, they're like, Black Lives Matter, and there's all this other stuff. And they're like, stop the insanity in their mind. Like, wait a second. What about people who are alcoholics? Why do we have liquor at work parties? What about like the stuff that they're bringing up? You're like, this idea of inclusion can get really big, and it can be a slippery slope. But the inclusion side can be a massive bubble, right? Because there's so many things that kind of differentiate us and make us feel like we do or don't belong.
Yeah, and that belonging is, and it's sharing experiences, right? So when everybody brings their experiences in, we get to, look at even our own experiences through a different lens. And, I tell a story about when, I'd heard words like privilege. The first time I heard, white privilege, and it's like, gosh, that feels like you just weaponized some word, and you sent the arrow through my heart. That kind of hurt. What do you mean by that? And as I started to understand is, I tell the story about we were driving in the car, and we go up to northern Minnesota, and we travel back, and a midpoint stop, we were getting gas. And of course, it's later in the day and kind of tired driving. And so I go in, I use the washroom and grab a cup of coffee and pay for that at the counter and say hi to the person behind the counter and go back in the car and jump in and drive away. And a few miles down the road, the phone rings, and it's the sheriff saying, "Did you just drive away from the gas station?" And it's like, oh my gosh, I didn't. Like, I went in and paid for the coffee, used the bathroom, and didn't pay for the gas. And it's like, oh, I'm an idiot. You know, my wife slapped me from the other seat just what is going on. And I said, so what do? Do I turn around and then go back to the shop and pay, or can I call them and just give them a credit card? And the sheriff's like, yeah, just do that. Here's the number. Call them, give them the credit card. And it's like, I'm so sorry. What an idiot I am. And, you know, apologizing to him and my wife for being that idiot. And so I called the shop and paid through credit card, and we kept going down, no disruption, still, 60 miles an hour, 65 miles an hour down the road. That mistake was forgiven, corrected, no big deal. And I think of it in this perspective, Heather. What would that have experienced? What experience would that have been for someone that wasn't me? How fast would they have been chased down that highway? What danger would they have been put in? And there's been people, we know these stories, have been killed for less than that. Yeah. And until I can internalize that my experience is going to be different in the same situation as someone else's, I'm not able to open my mind up enough to understand their perspective on experiences and then find a way to help. And so that, and I just wanted to clarify, when I say own your dot, that we have to own our dot to understand other people's experiences and then to help move forward together. And I don't want that to be my son-in-law, my neighbor's child. I don't want that to be friends of mine's kids having a completely different experience. And so maybe that's really far out there as for what the objective is, but that's the objective. What if we can equalize that opportunity to be a safe, solvable, simple situation for making a mistake, rather than the fallout that we all have to experience now that tears us apart and breaks down communities? I think big on this, and I think it's each one of us that can make that impact. And that's why I think it's worth being involved in the conversation, because it's going to inform our actions. That's my big hope. And that's why I'm grateful for each of you and being able to be in this conversation with you even today. We can take steps, but there are steps. We can't wait for somebody else. We aren't solving the one big problem. We're forming our next best action and decision.
I love that. I'm going to put a comment up real fast. There's a couple actually, but here's one from Tom. Thanks for joining, Tom. I always love seeing you here.
Hi, Tom.
I really believe that the conversation needs to come from a place outside of and beyond politics. When you frame this in any kind of political parlance, it will be a signal of someone to step away. And it's true. I think it gets back to, just walking about the earth as humans. Like we all come with our own baggage, and we all come with our own history and our own filter. And it's just, I agree. If we just move that other stuff aside and say you and me, toe to toe, you and me, just seeing each other. There was a powerful exercise, Melissa, you remember that Kevin Strauss did at No Longer Virtual, where we had to stare for, I can't remember if it was 2 minutes, how many minutes was it? We had to stare for quite a bit of time into a person's eyes, whether we knew them or not. And we had to truly see them. And it was an exercise of truly seeing them. And it was very awkward, very uncomfortable. I had never even done that to my own kids, stared that long into someone's eyes. And a couple of us had very emotional responses. So thank you for that, Kevin. That's something I'll never leave me. But I think that's kind of this idea of really truly seeing the other person and putting all that other crap aside and seeing their pain and seeing their perspective. Them in their shoes, man. How can I get in yours? Can I get in yours? Let me get in yours. Yours look kind of interesting. Let me get your shoes.
Heather, that reminds me of Maya Angelou said, when you know better, do better.
Yeah.
And so if you twist that around, in order to do better, you have to know better. And what that means is we have to each challenge our own belief systems, our own mental models of the world. And that's uncomfortable because we all want to believe that we're right. And we all are very entrenched in our rightness. And so it's hard. But that's the challenge. That's the challenge for each of us. And so to be able to find people that you trust that create a safe space for you to challenge your own belief systems, that's pretty special. And so in that respect, you know, that's what this does. That's what the Humans First movement does. Those are the kinds of things that will change the world.
All right, so now that we're approaching almost 45 minutes, I want to have us go around now and just talk about maybe from the, you know, related to the salon and of course leading up to the next one, what might be what might be the very next step that each of us individually, you know, might want to take. I just have to do a side note. It looks like my youngest son just joined my stream, so he says the best stream ever is what he said. So Mateo said that. I just happen to see that right now.
Does he have any questions for us?
Yeah, ask us if there's any questions, Mateo. Just go ahead and pose it right there. Okay, so let's go around. Starting with Dennis, you're the main catalyst for this. So what are you thinking of as your next step after what you've heard? I know it's to continue, but what else might there be?
Well, Melissa's already mentioned that magic word, listening. Right now, we're in that listening phase of listening to what we're hearing here, what we've heard coming in. There's been 2 articles already written about this gathering, which we've learned a lot from them, not so much in what was written, but in the reaction to the writing. As you know, it's down below where you get the real intense discussion. We've already made some adjustments to the next salon because some of these things are structural. Very important bit of feedback that we learned is let's stick with this topic. Let's not make it the flavor of the month or the evening news, because the problem isn't going to be solved between now and our next salon. Let's keep it going. Let's drive it deeper. Let's maybe have smaller rooms, you know, things like that, which makes so much sense. But that's not my brilliance. That's the feedback from the people in the audience that I like this. I want to come back. I want more time. We're going to expend it to 2 hours. You know, we're going to blah, blah, blah. What we're also going to intentionally do is we're going to lead the charge in, you know, making sure we don't show up next time with a bunch of what I'll call bobblehead dolls that all look alike and sound alike. We want to lead the charge in bringing back or coming back and bringing those new voices. I'm going to steal from Brene Brown again, because everybody knows I have a quote banging around my head all the time. I read this one yesterday. It says, you know, only when we're brave enough to explore the darkness will we discover the infinite power of our own light. We need people to walk in the dark with us and discover that light. And we know we can't do it alone. So I'm going to be more inclusive, more intentional, and just do more walking the talking.
Who wants to go next?
Mike, I can go. I'll go. So I guess my next step is to continue to try to get better at being comfortable being uncomfortable, and being comfortable being uncomfortable. And I think part of that is you can think of those conversations you have where you walk away and you go, "Oh, that was so frustrating." And so my intentional shift is to, instead of walking away feeling like I'm frustrated, is to walk away feeling like I have gained new understanding. And with that, my intention is to thank that person for helping me gain understanding. And if you think about the last time you thanked someone that you had, you know, vehemently disagreed with on whatever the topic is, that changes things also. Even though it's at the end of the conversation, you know, hey, thanks for having that conversation with me. Thank you for broadening my understanding. Because what that does is it tells that person, I didn't change your mind, but I listened to you, I heard you, and maybe that person will take that and create a ripple of listening in their own sphere of influence. So that's my intention.
You know, I think it's I love what everybody shared. And Heather, thank you for bringing us all on to have this conversation. It just feels right to stay on it, right? And I think my greatest encouragement is we don't have to abandon our circles right now to make this work. What we're really asking is let's expand our circles. And those that no longer fit our evolution, let them fall away. We don't have to discard them. Yeah. Let them fall away, but let's continue to grow that circle. And the greatest news is the only thing that's required to jump in is a bit of curiosity. And here's the great news to all this. Amateurs are welcome. like we're all amateurs at this. This has been going on my whole lifetime. And it doesn't appear that anybody's quite got it right because we stay stuck in this thing. So I just say, like, when we say fresh voice, you might be the one.
Yeah.
Be the savant. Come in. We need those fresh ideas because we've got room to grow here.
Yeah.
We
need to have another Salon word for the person who inspires the, wow, I never thought of that before. We need to have a word for that.
Mike, as we've said so often in some of these Humans First gatherings, let us never convey the impression that we have this under control. If we do, we're doing something wrong here because it's not our control, it's the audience.
I love some of the words I'm seeing in the chat on, being inclusive and creating a kind of open and safe environment. So my goal is my very next step is to teach, guide, coach this next generation of leaders on exactly how to do that, how to help people to feel like, make them feel like they belong, how to make it be more inclusive, to help them make small tweaks so that that their people feel like they are included. And it's not an easy task to do, but I think that's where I think I can commit. I can influence what that might look like. I can't control it, but I can influence it. So that's what I commit to doing. And this has been wonderful. There's so many ways we can go in this. So many, just amazing conversation, and it's rich, right? It's so rich, and our hearts are in the right place. And I think that's critical with all of this, right? This is not about us being right or being heard. Like, our voices are important. It's good. So I appreciate all of you being here. I'm just love seeing those wonderful faces, and just appreciate your openness to do this kind of in the last minute. And we'll share this out so that more can get to it. And then we all look forward, of course, to the next Salon where we can just continue to tweak it and make it better and better.
Heather, thank you so much.
Thank you, Heather.
Thank you all. Have a wonderful day. Thanks everybody for joining. Brian, Laura, Kevin, Sarah, on there, Tom. Thank you so much. See you all.